I never imagined my life would collapse so fast. One moment, I was packing my bags, dreaming of a new future in a land where everything seemed possible. The next, I was standing alone at the Houston airport with my heart pounding in my chest and a stranger waiting to pick me up. A man I thought I knew. A man who promised me the world. My name is Camila Alvarez. I am 29 years old, and the reason you're hearing this today is because silence nearly destroyed me. I want you to hear my voice now, because for too long, I swallowed every scream, every humiliation, every warning sign that told me to run, and I didn't. I stayed. I believed. It started with a message, a simple, "Hi, Hermosa," on an app that I never even took seriously. His name was Daniel. American, charming, successful. He said he was looking for something real, tired of shallow women who only wanted money or fame. He said I was different, said he could feel my soul through the screen. We spoke for hours, every night. His English was perfect, mine was broken, but he never laughed. He said my accent was cute, that I sounded like poetry. He sent flowers to my mother's house in Mexico just to make her smile, bought me a necklace with my name engraved, said he wanted me to wear it when I arrived so he could see it shine against my skin. I fell in love with the idea of him before I ever met the man. When he asked me to come live with him in Houston, I hesitated. I had dreams, my own life. I was working. 2 jobs, saving to open a small bakery with my cousin. But he insisted. He said, "Why struggle there when I can give you everything here? Love, stability, a future." He promised marriage, children, a home, a real life. He said I wouldn't need to lift a finger, just be his, just love him. And in my heart, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe I finally get to be happy. I sold everything I owned in 2 weeks. My blender, my books, my sewing machine, even my favorite chair. I gave up my apartment and kissed my father goodbye. My mother cried but smiled. She believed I had won the lottery. I did too. When I landed, he was there, just like he said he'd be, holding a small sign with my name. But his eyes didn't match his messages. His hug was stiff. He said traffic had been bad, didn't kiss me, didn't even offer to carry my bag. We drove in silence to his apartment. It wasn't the spacious, bright place he showed me in pictures. It was dark, cluttered, and smelled like mold. "This is temporary," he said, "just until I sort out a few things." But his tone had changed. The sweet man from the video calls was gone, replaced by someone distracted, impatient, cold. The first night, I cried in the shower so he wouldn't hear me. I told myself it was just nerves, that adjusting to a new country was hard, that maybe he was tired, maybe I expected too much. I clung to every good memory, every message he had ever sent. I told myself to be patient, that love needed time. He said he didn't want me working, that it wasn't safe without papers, that he would provide for everything. I thought that was romantic at first, protective, but then he took my passport, said it was for safekeeping, that it might get lost. He started deciding what I wore, who I could follow on Instagram. He deleted contacts from my phone while I slept. Every question I asked was met with a sigh or a sharp look. "Why are you being so ungrateful?" he'd say. "You're lucky I brought you here." And I believed that too. I started shrinking, bit by bit. I would wake up early to make him breakfast, hoping a warm plate would melt the ice between us. Sometimes it worked. Other times, he'd leave without touching the food. He said I didn't understand American culture, that I talked too much, smiled too little, that I was too needy, that I was too distant. Whatever I was, it was always wrong. The days blurred. I stopped calling home. I didn't want my parents to worry, didn't want to admit that maybe I had made a mistake. I told them I was fine, that Daniel was amazing, that Houston was beautiful. I lied with a smile while my heart crumbled. I remember one afternoon, I found an old photo of myself on my phone. I was at the beach laughing, hair wild, eyes bright. I stared at that girl like she was someone I had lost, like she had drowned somewhere between customs and his front door. I tried to smile like her, couldn't. There was a moment I'll never forget. I was in the kitchen, wearing a dress he had picked. He came home, looked at me, and said nothing. Just walked past like I was furniture. And in that silence, I heard it, the sound of something breaking inside me. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. That night, I stared at the ceiling, wondering what I had done wrong, wondering why love felt like prison, wondering how a man who once called me his sunrise could now treat me like I was in his way. If you've ever felt invisible in someone's presence, if you've ever begged for a kind word and received only silence, if you've ever believed in a love that slowly erased you piece by piece, then I want you to comment below. Say, "I matter," in the comments. Say it for every version of yourself that forgot. Your voice matters here. And if you believe stories like mine need to be heard, subscribe. Every subscriber is a reminder that these voices won't be buried in silence anymore. Because this is just the beginning. And what came next changed everything. I used to think that silence meant peace. But in that apartment, silence was punishment. It crept into every corner of the walls, every chair, every glance. Daniel barely spoke to me unless he needed something. And when he did speak, his words were clipped and cold, like I was a stranger who had overstayed her welcome. Except I had nowhere else to go. The room he said would be ours felt more like a guest closet than a home. One twin-sized bed, a window that barely opened, no curtains. The closet was already full of his things. So I folded my clothes and stacked them under the bed. I didn't complain. I didn't ask questions. I told myself again that this was temporary, that he had brought me here because he loved me. And love, I thought, meant being patient. It meant not making waves. He worked in construction, leaving early and coming home late, but his phone never left his hand. Sometimes he'd laugh at a message and turn away when I tried to peek. I told myself I was paranoid, that jealousy was ugly, that maybe he was just stressed. So I focused on being helpful. I cleaned the apartment every day, even the parts he said not to touch. I cooked meals he barely tasted. I lit candles to make the place feel warmer. Once, I tried to surprise him with his favorite meal. He came home late and said he wasn't hungry. Then he asked why I wasted food when I wasn't paying for groceries. That night, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried into a towel, but not loudly, never loudly, because if he heard, he'd get annoyed. And his annoyance came with slammed doors and days of silence. I noticed the control slowly, like fog rolling in under the door. He told me not to wear makeup when we went out, said it made me look cheap. Then it was my jeans, too tight, my tops, too low. So I started dressing the way he liked. Long sleeves, loose pants, neutral colors. I stopped fixing my hair, stopped painting my nails. The girl who once loved bright lipstick and dancing in mirrors became someone who flinched at her own reflection. He didn't want me going outside alone, said it was dangerous, that ice could be anywhere, that someone might notice my accent. He said I should be grateful he was protecting me, so I stayed inside. Every single day, I stared at the same four walls for weeks, watched the same shows over and over until the voices in English started making sense. I started translating arguments in my head, rehearsing what I'd say if someone asked about my visa, but no one ever did, because I never saw anyone except him. I asked about getting married. He said now wasn't the time, that things were complicated, that if I kept bringing it up, he'd start thinking I was just using him for papers. That cut deep, deeper than I expected, because I had given up my country, my language, my dignity, all for a man who now made me feel like a beggar in my own life. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit by the window and watch the neighbors. A woman across the street always danced while cleaning. Her music blasted through her open windows. Her laughter floated up to the sky. I would imagine myself in her apartment, free, happy, alive. Then I'd hear the keys in our door and snap back to reality. He started hiding things. His phone was always face down. He changed his passwords. He started taking his laptop to work, even though he never did before. One day I found a hair clip under the couch. It wasn't mine. He said it was old. I wanted to believe him, but something inside me had already started dying. And once something dies inside you, it's hard to bring it back to life. One morning, I woke up to find all my messages deleted from his phone. Every voice note I had ever sent, every photo, every memory, like I had never existed. When I asked why, he said, "Phones get full." That was his answer. Just that. Phones get full. I began to feel like a ghost. I existed in that apartment, but I wasn't really there. He spoke around me, not to me. He left me home while he went to parties with people I never met. Once, I heard him laughing on a call. I stepped out of the room and saw him smiling into his screen. When he noticed me, he ended the call and said it was work, but his smile was gone. One afternoon, I gathered the courage to ask if I could start working remotely. I had found a small job posting online for Spanish transcription. Nothing big, just a few hours a week. He said no, that it wasn't worth the risk, that if immigration found out, we'd both get in trouble. But I think it wasn't about immigration. I think he just didn't want me to have my own money, my own anything. Control doesn't always come with yelling or fists. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle. It's in the way someone looks through you instead of at you. It's in how they make you question your worth without ever raising their voice. It's in how they erase pieces of you until one day you wake up and realize you're not even a person anymore. You're just a shadow of who you used to be. If any of this feels familiar, I need you to know you're not alone. If you've ever felt trapped in a place that was supposed to be your home or silenced in a relationship that promised love, I want you to leave a comment below. Just write, "I see myself." Because sometimes seeing someone else go through it reminds us that we're not crazy, that what happened to us was real. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. This space is a shelter for stories that were never supposed to stay in the dark. Your voice here makes a difference. It started with a delay, just a few days at first, then a week. I blamed the stress, the change of country, the new food, the sleepless nights. I didn't want to believe what my body was already whispering. One morning, I walked to the corner pharmacy while Daniel was at work. My hands trembled as I paid for the test. The cashier smiled politely, unaware that the tiny box in my bag would decide the course of my life. Back at the apartment, I locked the bathroom door, stared at the instructions, and tried to breathe. One pink line appeared instantly, then another. My knees gave out before I could even sit down. I was pregnant. At first, I felt something close to hope. Maybe this would bring him back to me. Maybe this would be the reason for him to love me again. But when I told him that night, his reaction froze me. He didn't touch me. He didn't smile. He just stared at the wall and muttered, "You should have been more careful," as if this life inside me was a mistake that only I had made. I waited for him to say something else, to ask how I felt, to hold me, but he just grabbed his jacket and left. From that day, everything changed. He stopped coming home early. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. When he did, he smelled of alcohol and perfume that wasn't mine. The silence in that apartment grew louder, pressing against my chest until breathing felt like a chore. I tried to eat healthy, to take care of myself, but even the smell of food made me sick. The doctor at the free clinic said I needed rest and emotional support. I laughed quietly. Emotional support was something I hadn't known in months. There were days when I sat on the couch, hand on my stomach, whispering to the tiny heartbeat growing inside me. "It's okay," I'd say. "You'll never feel what I feel now." I promised that I would be stronger for both of us, but every promise felt fragile in that cold apartment. Every morning, I woke up with the same pit in my stomach, the fear of how long I could survive like this. Daniel didn't want to talk about the baby. When I brought up prenatal appointments, he shrugged. "Figure it out," he said. But how could I figure anything out without documents, money, or even a car? One day I asked him to take me to a checkup. He said he was busy, so I took the bus alone, clutching a piece of paper with the clinic's address written in shaky handwriting. I remember the nurse's eyes when she saw me, young, scared, foreign. She handed me vitamins and a small bottle of water. Her kindness nearly broke me. At night, I tried to tell him about the visit, about hearing the baby's heartbeat for the first time, about how the sound made everything feel real. He didn't look up from his phone. He just nodded and said, "Good." The same tone you'd use for a stranger talking about the weather. That's when I realized he wasn't coming back. Not emotionally. Not ever. I started noticing how small my world had become. The four walls of the apartment, the narrow kitchen, the flickering light in the hallway. My only escape was the window. I'd watch people walking their dogs, couples laughing, mothers pushing strollers. I'd imagine being one of them. Free, loved, safe, but that fantasy faded each time I caught my reflection in the glass. My skin had grown pale, my eyes dull, my hair lifeless. I barely recognized myself. One evening I heard him on the phone. His voice was softer, lighter. He was talking to someone named B. He laughed, the kind of laugh he hadn't used with me in months. I stood in the doorway, invisible. When he hung up, I asked who it was. He said, "A friend." Then he turned on the TV and ignored me. But later that night, when I saw his phone light up again, my heart sank. The wallpaper wasn't me anymore. It was her. I wish I could say I screamed, that I fought back, but I didn't. I just sat there, numb, because deep down, I already knew. He had moved on long before I found out. My pregnancy wasn't a miracle to him. It was an inconvenience, something to hide, something to erase. He stopped sleeping next to me. Sometimes, I'd hear the door quietly close after midnight. Sometimes he didn't even bother sneaking. Once, I heard him laughing outside, his voice mixing with another woman's. The sound cut deeper than any insult. It wasn't just betrayal. It was abandonment in slow motion. I began to write letters to my unborn child. Pages of everything I couldn't say aloud. I told them about the songs I used to love, about my favorite places back home, about how I once believed in fairy tales. I didn't know if I'd ever have the courage to read them again, but writing made me feel like maybe I still existed, like maybe my story wasn't over yet. One morning, I woke up and he was gone. His clothes, his laptop, even the photo we took the day I arrived, everything. I called him until my fingers hurt, but he never answered. Hours later, he texted, "Don't make this harder than it is." And, just like that, the person I had built my entire life around vanished with a few cold words. The loneliness that followed was suffocating. I spent days lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, too tired to cry, too empty to think. The baby kicked for the first time during one of those afternoons. A small, gentle flutter. It was the only reminder that life was still moving forward, even when I wasn't. When my neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Lee, knocked on the door one day to ask if I was okay, I lied and said yes. She handed me a small bowl of soup and said, "You don't look okay." I almost broke down right there. That bowl of soup tasted like the first bit of kindness I had felt in months. If you've ever found yourself loving someone who made you feel invisible, I want you to know that your heart wasn't foolish. It was brave. You gave everything you had because you believed in something good. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. Leave a comment below and tell me if you've ever loved someone who made you disappear. Just write, "I'm still here," because you are. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to this channel so more voices like ours can be heard. Together, we remind each other that even in silence, we still exist. The day I found out the truth started like any other. I woke up to the sound of the neighbor's dog barking and the morning light spilling through the thin blinds. My stomach ached and I could barely keep food down. I remember holding my belly and whispering to the little life inside me that everything would be okay, even though I didn't believe it myself. Daniel had left early again, like always. His shoes were gone from the corner, his coffee mug still on the counter, half full. The smell of his cologne still lingered in the air, mixed with a scent that didn't belong to me. Sweet, unfamiliar, feminine. I ignored it at first. I had become an expert at ignoring things, ignoring the late nights. The lipstick stains, I told myself, were accidents. The perfume that wasn't mine. But that morning, something inside me broke through the fog of denial. I took his laptop while I was cleaning and opened it. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type the password, but I remembered it. He had told me once, back when we still trusted each other. What I saw made my knees buckle. There they were, photos, dozens of them. Daniel with another woman, on the beach, in restaurants, in Miami, smiling, happy, free. He had posted them on his social media, like I never existed. One photo showed her sitting on his lap, wearing the same sunglasses I had once bought him for his birthday. Another picture, captioned "My Forever," showed them clinking champagne glasses at a hotel pool. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. My chest burned, my vision blurred. I wanted to scream, to throw his laptop against the wall, but I didn't. I just sat there, paralyzed, watching the slideshow of lies. The comments underneath were full of hearts and congratulations. You two are perfect together. So happy for you both. I scrolled and scrolled until I couldn't breathe. My hands went to my belly again, and I whispered, "I'm sorry," because it felt like I had failed not just myself, but the tiny heartbeat inside me. When he came home that night, I was waiting. The photos were still open on the screen. He walked in, saw them, and for the first time, didn't even try to hide it. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just said, "You shouldn't have gone through my things." His voice was calm, almost bored, like the betrayal meant nothing. I asked who she was. He said it didn't matter. When I asked if he loved her, he shrugged. Then he looked at me with those cold, empty eyes and said, "You were a mistake, Camilla. You and that baby. None of this was supposed to happen." I remember my hands trembling, my mouth opening but no sound coming out. There are moments in life that silence becomes louder than any scream. That was one of them. He grabbed his keys and left. The door slammed, and with it, something inside me shattered completely. I sat on the floor until the sun came up, surrounded by the pieces of a life that had never really been mine. After that, he stopped coming home altogether. Days passed without a word. The groceries ran out. The rent was due. My phone buzzed with messages from numbers I didn't recognize, all of them in English I couldn't fully understand. Bills, warnings, final notices. The only messages that mattered never came. Not a single text from him. Not one call to ask if I was okay. One night, I couldn't sleep. I opened social media again, even though I promised myself I wouldn't. He was still posting photos with her in Miami, this time holding her waist while she smiled at the camera. I zoomed in on the background and saw the hotel name reflected in the glass. I searched it online. A luxury resort, ocean view, $2,000 a night. I felt my stomach twist. I was sitting in a dark apartment with no food, pregnant, while he was drinking champagne in Miami with another woman. There's a certain pain that doesn't scream. It just sinks. Deep, quiet, heavy. That's how it felt. Every beat of my heart was a reminder that I had been nothing more than a secret he wanted to erase. The anger came later. First came the shame, the questions. How could I have been so blind? How could I have given up everything for someone who saw me as disposable? I started looking at myself in the mirror differently, not out of vanity, but searching for the woman I used to be, the one who laughed easily, who believed in kindness, who dreamed of love. She was gone. In her place stood someone I didn't recognize, someone who had learned the hard way that love without respect is just a slow kind of death. The days bled into each other. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped waiting. But the universe has a cruel way of testing you. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry, there was a knock on the door. A delivery man stood there holding a small package addressed to Daniel. I signed for it and brought it inside. When I opened it, I found a bracelet, delicate, gold, engraved with the words, "To my love, forever." My stomach turned. It wasn't for me. I left the bracelet on the kitchen counter. When he finally came back 3 days later, he saw it, picked it up, and smiled. Not at me, at the memory of her. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Don't make this complicated, Camilla. You knew what this was." I didn't. I thought I was building a life. He thought I was temporary, replaceable, invisible. I realized then that I wasn't living in love. I was surviving in captivity. I started having nightmares after that. I'd wake up sweating, clutching my stomach, terrified of what kind of world I was bringing this child into. I'd stare at the ceiling and whisper, "You're not him. You're not his mistake. You're mine, and I'll protect you." It was the first time I spoke to my baby not with fear, but with determination. The next morning, when I opened the curtains, sunlight flooded the room for the first time in weeks. It hit the cracked tiles, the dirty dishes, the empty chair across from me. But somehow it also hit something else, a tiny spark inside me that refused to die. If you've ever looked at someone you loved and realized they were a stranger, you know this pain. If you've ever watched your world collapse quietly while everyone else believed you were fine, you understand. I want you to write in the comments, "I will rise." Say it for yourself. Say it for every piece of you that someone tried to break. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. Because every story shared here is proof that even when love destroys us, we can rebuild from the ashes. It was a Tuesday morning. Quiet, too quiet. I remember the way the light filtered through the blinds, slicing shadows across the floor like prison bars. I had just finished brushing my hair when I heard the knock. 3 sharp hits, firm and intentional. Not the kind of knock that comes from a neighbor. Not the kind that waits. My heart jumped. I stood frozen in the middle of the room. The knock came again, harder this time. I approached the door slowly, every step heavy with dread. Through the peephole, I saw 3 men, uniforms, badges, no smiles. I opened the door, and they said my name. Not the soft way my mother used to say it, not the sweet whisper I had used when talking. To the baby. No, they said it like a warning. Camila Alvarez. They told me they had received a report, that I was in the country illegally, that I was violating immigration law. I remember the way their words echoed inside my skull. Report, violation, removal. One of them asked me to step outside. I tried to explain. I said I was pregnant, that I was alone, that I didn't understand what was happening. He told me they were just doing their job, that someone had called, someone had reported me. It didn't take long for my mind to connect the pieces. Daniel. He was the only one who had all my information. He was the one who knew I had no one else. I had been discarded and now erased. They didn't treat me cruelly, but they didn't treat me kindly either. I was processed like a number, fingerprints, photos, questions in rapid English that I barely understood. I tried to tell them I needed prenatal care, but they just wrote things down on clipboards and moved to the next step. They handcuffed me, not behind my back, since I was visibly pregnant, but in front, as if that was supposed to make it less humiliating. The cold metal dug into my wrists. I looked down at the bump under my shirt and felt this unbearable mix of shame and guilt and fury. I hadn't even done anything wrong except trust the wrong man. Inside the immigration van, I sat beside another woman. She was older, quiet. She looked at me and whispered, "You too?" I nodded. Neither of us spoke again. The silence between us was thick with pain, like we were both trying to hold back oceans. We arrived at the detention center. The air smelled like bleach and despair. The walls were gray, cold, unfeeling. There were no windows in the intake room, only fluorescent lights that buzzed loudly and never blinked. They gave me a uniform, a thin cotton outfit that didn't fit right. No bra, no shoelaces. I sat on a metal bench for hours before someone called my name. A nurse checked my blood pressure, asked how far along I was. I said 6 months. She made a note, said I'd be seen by a doctor soon. Soon meant 5 days. The first night was the worst. I couldn't sleep. The cot was hard and the blanket was paper thin. Every movement sent a sharp jolt through my lower back. The room was full of other women, some sobbing, some praying. One woman just stared at the ceiling, unmoving, like she had already left her body. There was no privacy, not even in the bathroom. I had to shower with strangers, eat food that made me sick. My stomach churned, and the nausea returned with full force. One guard told me I had to finish my tray or I'd be written up. I forced myself to eat cold rice and something that tasted like plastic chicken while holding back tears. I wasn't allowed to make calls except once a week, for 5 minutes. I tried to reach my family, but the line didn't go through. I left a voicemail. I don't even remember what I said. Just my name, that I was okay, that I was trying to be strong. Each day in that place felt like 10. I lost track of time. My belly kept growing, but everything else inside me felt smaller and smaller. The other women started calling me La Mama. Some would rub my belly gently, like a blessing. Some would cry when they saw me. One woman gave me her extra pillow. She said, "You need it more than me." I began to wonder if I would give birth in there, if my child would take their first breath in a cage, if I would even be allowed to hold them. I asked the nurse one day, what would happen if I went into labor? She said they'd take me to a hospital handcuffed. I'd be allowed to hold the baby, then separated. She didn't say it with cruelty. She said it like it was routine, like it happened every day, and it did. I wasn't the first woman to be betrayed, detained, discarded. I saw women who had lived here for years, women with children, women who had built lives, homes, families, all waiting, all afraid. There was one night I'll never forget. I woke up sweating. My body was shaking, my heart racing. I thought I was going into labor early. The pain shot through my back, down my legs. I screamed for help. It took 10 minutes for a guard to come. He told me to breathe, told me it was probably false labor, told me to lie down. I lay there, curled on my side, whispering over and over, "Not here, not like this." The pain eventually eased, but the fear remained. I started praying at night, not to be released, not even for justice, just for protection, just to make it through one more day, one more meal, one more heartbeat. And through it all, Daniel never called, never asked, never checked. I wasn't a person to him anymore. I was a problem he had solved, a mistake he had erased. If you've ever been betrayed by the one person you trusted most, I see you. If you've ever felt like your voice was too small, too foreign, too unimportant to matter, I promise you, it does. Write, "I am not invisible," in the comments if this speaks to your heart. And if you're new here, subscribe. Your presence gives strength to stories like mine, stories that refuse to disappear. The day of departure arrived with no fanfare. I woke to the flat hum of the air conditioner and the weight of my swollen body lying alone in a narrow cot. The word removal flickered in my mind like a faulty neon sign. I tried to focus on my baby's kicks, the tiny reminders that something else existed inside me, something living and worthy. A guard arrived quietly, unopened. I was told the van would take me to the airport. My heart tightened, because airports mean endings. My suitcase was a cheap carry-on. My papers were printed pages in English I half understood. I held the straps so hard my fingers left indentations. When the immigration van pulled up, I saw the dull gray of the facility receding. The woman beside me in the back seat whispered quietly, "Good luck." Her accent was different, but the fear in her voice carried the same weight. Outside, the Texas sun beat down. I felt the heat like a lash across my back. I was still pregnant, and I was being returned to a country I barely called home. The airport lobby was cold, too official, the smell of polished floors mixed with jet fuel. My ankles hurt from being handcuffed in the van and inside the building. I stood under a fluorescent light, looking at screens that showed other people's vacations, other people's freedom. A flight to Mexico City, Mexico, boarded at gate 34. That would be me before long. I took one deep breath and closed my eyes as I felt the life inside me move. I rubbed my belly and whispered, "We are coming home." But I didn't know what home meant anymore. The officers escorted me through security. I was not allowed the same lines as travelers. I was in a separate queue. I observed businessmen with briefcases, families with strollers. I saw a toddler pointing at my handcuffs. The mother turned away. I wondered what she thought of me. A silent threat, a lesson. One part of me wanted to cry. Another just held still, numb. On the plane, I was seated in the last row. The tray table was stained. The upholstery faded. I leaned my head against the window and looked out at the wing. The engine hummed. I thought of all the times he had promised to protect me. The times I had believed him when he said I would live with dignity. The gullible girl who left everything for a dream. The baby kicking. I touched my belly in the dim cabin light. "You are coming with me," I promised. Flight attendant handed me water. Cold plastic bottle shaken. The drop rolled down the side and into my lap. I didn't wipe it. The cold hit my bare skin through the thin fabric of my dress. Someone across the aisle stared. I held his gaze and then looked away. My reflection in the window blinked back. A woman stranded between two countries. The baby kicked again. It felt strong, defiant. I stood up slowly when the seatbelt sign clicked off. I walked to the restroom. The small space made me dizzy. I held onto the sink and closed my eyes. A wave passed through my lower abdomen. Not pain yet, but an invitation. I started counting breaths. 1, 2, 3. I told myself I would make it, just for this one ride, just for this moment. When I returned to my seat, I found my carry-on unzipped. The notebook with my letters to my unborn child was visible. A guard was standing there. He said nothing. I closed it quietly and sank back into the seat. I told the baby, "Hold on," because I still had to find a reason to come back stronger than I had left. The flight was long, from the United States to Mexico. The announcements made in English, then Spanish. I understood only pieces. I didn't know how to ask for help because I felt hollow inside. I focused on the window again. The desert below sank into green hills, then into city lights. The miles passed. The hesitation in my heart remained. Landing triggered a rush of smells. Wet pavement, city traffic, hot asphalt. I stepped off the plane. Handbag on my shoulder, notebook in hand. The air felt thicker than before. I pressed my hand to my belly and said softly, "We are alive." The officers walked behind me to the immigration gate. The questions came in Spanish. My voice cracked. I answered. "Where were you living? Why did you travel? Are you carrying a child?" I nodded. They asked how far along. I said, months." They stamped my passport, twice. I felt the ink on my skin, my release and my exile. Outside the terminal, my mother was there, her eyes red, her arms open. I ran and hugged her. I told the baby, "You are safe now." And I told my mother, "Thank you for waiting." I didn't speak of the man who betrayed me. I didn't speak of the cold apartment or the checkups I missed or the nights I cried alone. I only held her tighter and let the tears come. In the months that followed, I heard him post it again. A social media ad, a vacation selfie in Miami, a story someone forwarded, each image a reminder that he had moved on before. I had landed. I told the baby, "Forget him. We are writing our own story. I started reading to you under the mango tree in our backyard. I started saving for your first shoes. I started dreaming again. If you ever felt like the ground under you collapsed, I want you to know you are not falling alone." Write, "I am stronger than fear," in the comments so someone else hears your voice. And if this is your first time here, consider subscribing. Because every time a story like this finds light, it proves that even countries and borders cannot erase our worth. Coming back felt like arriving at a party where no one remembered inviting you. Familiar faces blurred by time. The streets looked the same, but I was not. My body heavier, my mind louder. My mother hugged me every morning like she needed to confirm I was real. I'd catch her staring at my belly, lips pressed together like she was praying, but didn't know how to start. We lived in a small neighborhood on the edge of the city. Houses pressed, close, the walls thin enough to hear a neighbor's cough at night. It smelled of tortillas, dust, and childhood memories I had tried to outgrow. There was no room for bitterness, but it still lived in the corner of my chest like an unwanted tenant. The first thing I learned was that people talked. Whispers followed me to the market. They didn't say my name, but they didn't need to. Deportada, pregnant, alone. That's all they saw. I kept my head down and focused on surviving. I didn't have the luxury of shame. My mother had no money to spare. The little she made selling food barely covered our electricity. So I started helping her. Mornings, I peeled vegetables. Afternoons, I packed meals into plastic containers. We sold them to construction workers, taxi drivers, anyone with enough pesos to eat. I wore a scarf to cover my face from the sun, but also from the eyes of those who looked too long. The baby moved more now. Little flutters turned into solid kicks. I talked to her while folding napkins, while sweeping the kitchen, while fighting tears on nights when the cramps came. I told her stories, not fairy tales, real stories, about women who survived worse, about grandmothers who raised children with nothing but dirt floors and fierce hearts. I told her she came from fire. There were days when I broke, quietly, so no one would hear, in the bathroom, in the laundry room, once behind the water tank on the roof where I went to hang clothes. I pressed my back to the wall and let it all out. Grief for the girl I used to be, anger at the man who walked away, fear that I would never be enough. My sister offered to help. She lived 2 towns away, married to a mechanic. They weren't rich, but they had peace. She gave me old baby clothes, diapers, a small crib with one missing screw. Her kindness felt like sunlight in a room that had been dark too long. But there were still obstacles. I had no medical insurance. The clinic in our neighborhood was overcrowded. Women sat for hours holding swollen feet and sleeping toddlers. I waited my turn like everyone else. The doctor was kind but tired. He checked my blood pressure, listened to the heartbeat, gave me iron pills, and told me to rest. I nodded even though I couldn't afford to. Rest was a luxury. Work didn't stop. Bills didn't wait. I began baking at night, empanadas, small cakes, bread rolls. I sold them in the mornings at the school gate. Some mothers frowned. Others smiled softly and gave extra coins. I think they saw something in my eyes, the quiet ache of a woman trying not to fall apart. A neighbor let me borrow her sewing machine. I hadn't sewn since I was a teenager, but my hands remembered. I stitched baby blankets from old shirts. Then I started taking small mending jobs, hemming pants, fixing zippers. My back ached, my fingers cramped, but every peso counted, every thread a stitch in my own healing. People started noticing. Slowly, the judgment turned into curiosity, then into silent respect. The same women who once avoided my eyes began asking for recipes, for baby name ideas. They called me strong. I didn't feel strong. I felt exhausted, but sometimes pretending is enough. The day my water broke, I was kneading dough. The pain came like thunder, sudden, relentless. My mother rushed me to the hospital on the back of my cousin's motorcycle. I held onto her waist and prayed we wouldn't crash. We didn't. Labor lasted 12 hours. The room smelled like bleach and adrenaline. Nurses shouted instructions. My mother whispered prayers. I screamed into a pillow, then fell silent. When the baby arrived, everything else disappeared. She was tiny, wrinkled, beautiful. Her cry was the most perfect sound I had ever heard. I named her Alma. It means soul. I held her against my chest and whispered the first promise I ever kept. You will never feel what I felt. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched her breathe. Her fingers curled into fists. I kissed her forehead and cried. Not from fear, but from release. Because despite everything, we had made it. If you've ever rebuilt yourself with nothing but your hands and your will, I want to hear your story. Leave a comment below and write, I rise for them. Let it be your reminder. And if you feel seen here, subscribe. This space holds stories like yours. Stories that matter. Stories that make surviving a revolution. Alma was born during a thunderstorm. I always took that as a sign, not of chaos, but of strength, the kind that rattles windows and makes people pause mid-step. From the very beginning, she was louder than her size. Her cry filled the hospital room, echoed through my bones, reminded me that life didn't just continue, it demanded to be heard. The first nights were quiet in a strange way. The silence wasn't absence, it was sacred. I watched her sleep on my chest, her breath tiny and rhythmic, her hands curling and uncurling like she was holding on to invisible threads. I was scared to sleep, scared to miss a moment, scared that if I blinked, she might disappear like everything else I had once loved. But she didn't. She stayed. She was real. She was mine. Motherhood didn't arrive gently. It came like a wave, crashing and cold. I had no time to mourn or rest. I bled and breastfed and cried in the same hour. My body was stitched and swollen, my heart even more so. But every morning, I wrapped her in the same blanket I had sewn while still waiting for her, and I whispered, "We start again." Food was tight, money tighter. I began selling again just 3 weeks after giving birth. Alma came with me in a sling tied to my chest. Her warmth steadied me when I felt like collapsing. I baked at night, holding her with one arm, rolling dough with the other. The rhythm of survival became familiar, not easier, but familiar. Customers began to remember me, not just as the girl who had come back pregnant, but as the mother with the smile and the homemade pies. They asked about Alma, brought her tiny gifts, a red ribbon, a small knitted hat. They didn't say much, but I felt their kindness slowly sewing something back together in me. Social media had always been something distant, something for the people who lived louder than me. But one night, while Alma slept in my arms, I opened an account. I posted a photo of her in the blanket, just her. No hashtags, no filters. I wrote, "She saved me," without knowing it. I didn't expect anything, but people responded. Not just likes, messages, stories. Other women who had been left, who had rebuilt, who had learned to carry joy beside pain. I began sharing more. My baking, my sewing, the small ways I was trying to build something out of nothing. I didn't show my face at first, just my hands, my work, my daughter, and that was enough. Slowly, people followed, shared, encouraged. What started as an outlet became a window. One day, a message changed everything. A woman from a larger city offered to stock my baked goods in her cafe. She said, "There's something about the way you write. People taste your soul in your food." I cried for hours after reading that, because for the first time, someone saw more than my scars. They saw value. I took the risk. I sent boxes of cookies wrapped in brown paper with handwritten notes. Orders increased. Then came a radio interview. Then a local TV feature. People loved the story. The girl who came back broken. The daughter who gave her purpose. The mother who turned pain into bread. Alma was at my side through it all. When I stirred dough, she babbled. When I sewed, she giggled at the sound of the machine. She grew with the rhythm of resilience. Her first word wasn't mama. It was pan, bread. I laughed so hard I scared the neighbors. The house changed. We fixed the roof, painted the walls, bought a second-hand fridge. We celebrated her first birthday with music and candles, and a cake I made myself with more love than flour. Neighbors came. Family gathered. For the first time, the air was full of laughter that didn't ache. But the biggest shift wasn't the money. It wasn't the followers or the small success. It was inside me. One morning, while folding laundry, I caught my reflection in the window. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I saw the woman I had become. Not who he left, not who the world tried to forget, but someone entirely new. Someone who stayed standing. There's a quote I once read. Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. I didn't understand it until then. Because you don't really know who you are until you've had to hold your own pieces and decide which ones to keep. If you're watching this and you've ever had to start from nothing, I want to honor you. You are not your mistakes. You are not what they left behind. You are the work of your own hands, your own heart. Share your truth in the comments with the words, "I built this life." And if these words found a place inside you, subscribe to stay with us. Because here, we build together. I always believed that silence was the only way to survive. But then the notifications started. A message from a woman I had never met saying she found me on Instagram. She said she saw me, a stranger across the screen, and felt less alone. I didn't think it could happen. Not after everything, but the world slipped in anyway. My daughter Alma slept in the sling around my chest, and I logged into my account from my dusty laptop, the same one I used for editing photos of cookies and baby blankets. The first post had only a few likes. I didn't care. I wrote simply, "She saved me without knowing it," and I didn't expect anything more. Then someone commented, "Your story matters." The words felt strange, printed in blue under the photo. I hadn't thought about story. I thought about running away. I thought about hiding. But this woman, someone I'd never seen, told me I mattered, and I stared at the screen like it held the truth I had been missing. I responded with a, "Thank you," though my hands trembled. Over the next days, I posted again, photos of dough rising, of flour dust on my fingers, of Alma's tiny hands wrapped around a spoon. I wrote small captions, "We are building, from ashes, not perfect, but ours." Slowly, followers grew. Not thousands, but enough for someone to say they were watching, enough to make a difference. One evening, I received a message from a cafe owner in a city I had never visited, asking if I would consider selling my baked goods there. I laughed. Me? The one who was told I didn't belong in the country that gave a man a visa over me? I stared at the laptop and thought, maybe this is it, possibly a lifeline. I messaged back. We talked. I boxed cookies. I wrapped them in brown paper and tied them with string. I sent them with shaky hands. I watched the tracking number like a lifeline. When they arrived, the cafe posted a photo. Local girls' treats now available. I sat in the kitchen of our small house, Alma asleep under the mango tree. Outside, and I cried. Not for the past, for the first time. Of the future. Orders increased. I hired a young woman from the neighborhood to help me pack. Her little boy played with Alma in the corner while I measured sugar. And then the local radio station asked to interview me. I walked into the studio wearing an apron and a scarf I had chosen so my hair wouldn't hide my eyes. I heard the engineer push the mic and say, "Ready when you are, Camilla." I breathed. Live on air. I never planned to be a success. I planned to survive. So thank you for listening. I didn't talk about his betrayal. I didn't mention the van, the cuffs, the checklist of questions. I said, "I see you. I will keep going for you." The hosts nodded. The red light glowed. And afterward, people approached me on the street. A woman touched my shoulder and said, "Your story lifted me." That word, lift, felt heavy and light all at once. Then a local television crew came. They filmed me in the bakery. I was nervous. The camera followed my hands kneading dough, the sunlight through the window, Alma giggling as she danced around boxes ready for shipment. They asked me about dreams. I said this, "My dream is to open a place where women like me can learn to bake, to sew, to start again." My voice cracked, but steady enough. I didn't know if I deserved the spotlight. But standing there, people looked at me differently. Not as the deported pregnant woman, as the mother, the entrepreneur, the survivor. With recognition came new pressure. I felt exposed. I worried the world would find the cracks. I worried that if they knew everything about the airport, the cuffs, the van, they would see me as broken, not building. So I chose what I would share, not the shame, the work, not the tears, the rise. I learned that choosing your own narrative is a revolution in itself, that your voice is a power long ignored until you speak it. And Alma? She thrived. She turned two under the mango tree. Her first word really was pan, because bread had become our language. She held up a muffin and said pan, and I laughed until tears blurred my vision. That laughter filled the room where once only emptiness lived. I told her, "You are my proof, my reason, my definition of success. If you've ever had to turn pain into something that others taste, that others feel, I feel you. Write, I transform in the comments. You are doing something unimaginable. And if this is your first time here, subscribe, because every voice matters here, especially the ones that broke and rebuilt." I never expected to hear from him again. Not really. Years had passed since the airport, since the cuffs, since the moment he decided I was disposable. I had built a life from dust and determination, raising Alma, baking, sewing, selling pieces of myself to the world not as a victim, but as someone who survived. And yet, one morning, a notification popped up on my phone. An email. His name. I froze. He had lost everything. The social media posts, the luxury vacations, the carefree images he had once flaunted, gone. His job was terminated after complaints about his conduct. His friends and his so-called lover had disappeared from his life. It was as if the world had turned while I stayed still, working, surviving, and building something real. And now he reached out. The email was short, apologetic, almost timid. He asked for forgiveness, said he regretted leaving me behind, said he wished he could undo the pain he caused. I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Every memory came rushing back. The apartment that was never mine. The late nights alone. The constant fear. The mornings I woke to an empty room and wondered if he had ever cared. The betrayal. The social media posts with her smiling in Miami while I was held in silence. And yet, there was nothing left to respond. No words could erase the years. No apology could reconstruct the nights I held Alma and whispered promises to survive for her. He had lost the only thing that mattered, me. I closed the email without typing a reply. I didn't need to. I had survived. He had failed at everything, and now I could breathe freely without waiting for someone who never intended to stay. I thought about justice, not the legal kind, not the kind that can be summoned by courts or lawyers. My justice was different. It was seeing him lose the life he had tried to control while I built a world of my own. My justice was Alma's first steps, my first online siu. Order arriving at a local cafe, the laughter in my kitchen that belonged only to us. My justice was proof that power never resides in cruelty, only in persistence, resilience, and love that cannot be broken. Sometimes I imagine him seeing our life now. Alma running barefoot in the garden, crumbs on her dress, her laughter bouncing against the walls I painted myself. Me kneading dough at the counter, my hair messy, my apron covered in flour, smiling without reservation. Our home filled with warmth, not fear. Could he even imagine it? Could he grasp that every moment I had survived had brought me here? That I had found freedom in the very place he tried to erase me? The irony is sharp. He believed that by discarding me, he would gain peace, control, even happiness. Instead, he lost it all. The people who once smiled at him stopped. Opportunities vanished. His mistakes caught up. Life has a way of teaching lessons in currency far greater than money or status. And while he scrambled, apologizing too late, I was thriving, creating and building a legacy with Alma. A life that is ours and ours alone. I had become the kind of woman he could never understand. A woman whose strength comes from surviving betrayal, whose wisdom comes from loss, whose joy is rooted in overcoming adversity. The small victories in my bakery, the connections forged with people who believed in our story, the freedom of walking into the market without fear or judgment, these were the markers of a life reclaimed. And Alma, my daughter, embodied all of it. She was the tangible proof that survival is powerful, and love endured in forms stronger than dependence. I learned that revenge is not about hurting someone who wronged you. It is about building a life so full, so undeniable, that the world itself becomes the answer. When he asked for forgiveness, he was asking for permission to return to a life that had already moved past him, and there was no room left, no door open. My time had been invested in growth, in family, in community. My energy was no longer for him. If you have ever felt the sting of betrayal, the silent suffering of someone who walked away, I want you to write in the comments, "I rise above." Say it for yourself. Say it for the ones you protect, for the life you build. And if you are here for the first time, subscribe. Because witnessing survival, witnessing transformation, reminds us all that real justice is not always in the hands of others. Sometimes it is, quietly, profoundly, in your own life. The house is quiet now. Alma is asleep under the soft glow of the bedside lamp. I sit at the kitchen table, the same one I scrubbed with my own hands, the same one that has seen every triumph, every tear, every quiet moment of fear and determination. I look around and I can hardly believe it is ours. The walls are painted in colors I chose. The floors bear the marks of our journey, scratches, dents, little stains that tell a story no one else could understand. And in the middle of it all, I am finally free. Not because someone allowed me to be, not because a man apologized, not because the world turned my way. Free because I chose to keep going, even when every sign told me to stop. Alma wakes sometimes in the middle of the night. She cries, she kicks, she reaches for me. And in those moments, I hold her close and feel the pulse of life that carried us both through years of uncertainty. I remember the day I left the United States, the fear pressing on me like a stone, the weight of injustice, the betrayal, the silence. I remember the nights alone, crying into a pillow, whispering promises to my unborn child I didn't know if I could keep. And here we are, alive, whole, stronger than ever. I have learned that survival is a kind of art. It is messy, it is painful, it is layered with decisions that hurt and choices that heal. I have learned that love, when given to the right person, is life-giving. When withheld, it is a lesson in resilience. I have learned that no one has the power to define your worth except yourself. I have built a life that is unapologetically mine. Every meal I bake, every blanket I sew, every story I share on the screen is a declaration of the woman I became. A woman who no longer waits for permission. A mother who protects, nurtures, and rises. People often ask me how I stayed strong, how I could rebuild from nothing. The truth is, I didn't know I was strong until I had no other choice. The truth is, every small act, preparing breakfast, holding my baby, folding laundry, answering messages from women who needed to know they were not alone, added up. Every sunrise reminded me that there was another day to try. Every night reminded me to hold tight to what mattered: love, courage, and the unyielding desire to survive with dignity. And now, when I walk outside, the sunlight on my skin, Alma by my side, the neighbors smiling as she waves and giggles, I feel a sense of peace I never imagined possible. Not perfection, but presence. Not certainty, but hope. Every scar, every heartbreak, every sleepless night has led me here. I am not who I was. I am more. I am a mother. I am a survivor. I am someone who will never let the cruelty of others define the limits of her life. I thank you for being here, for listening, for letting these words reach you. Thank you for believing in the power of a story that refuses to be silenced. Your time, your attention, your willingness to witness this journey means more than I can ever fully express. It is proof that stories of survival, of rising from betrayal and heartbreak, have a place in the world. And it is proof that even in the darkest moments, light finds a way to seep in. If you feel moved by this story, I invite you to click on the next video that appears on your screen. Continue this journey with us. Watch, listen, and remember that every story of struggle carries the potential for triumph. Every voice matters. Every survival high matters. And every life rebuilt piece by piece is a victory that deserves to be shared. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for witnessing, for believing, for being part of this journey. And now, let's continue together, because our stories, our triumphs, our lives are far too precious to stay in silence. Click the next video and keep moving forward with us.